I wasn't expecting much when I walked through the front door that evening. A quiet house. Maybe the smell of dinner if Hannah was feeling particularly domestic. What I didn't expect was the sight of a bouquet of crimson roses sitting smugly on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought they might be for me. After all, our anniversary was coming up in a couple of weeks, and Hannah had a flair for the dramatic when it came to gifts. But when I spotted the little white card tucked between the petals, my chest tightened. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again. My stomach dropped. Hannah, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. She appeared a moment later, still in her workout clothes, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Hey babe, you're home early. Her smile faltered when she saw the roses in my hand. These for you? I asked, holding up the bouquet. Her face froze for a split second, just long enough to set off alarm bells in my head. Then she laughed, too loudly, like she'd been caught in some harmless joke. Oh, those? They must have been delivered to the wrong address. You know how people mess up sometimes. Her explanation sounded plausible enough on the surface, but the color in her cheeks and the way she avoided my eyes told a different story. Wrong address? I repeated, setting the roses on the counter. Then why do they have your name on them? She blinked, the color draining from her face. Oh, I don't know. That's weird, right? She reached for the card, crumpling it in her hand like it was trash. Whoever sent them must have made a mistake. What an idiot. I watched her closely, my mind racing. Hannah wasn't usually this jittery. If anything, she was the master of brushing things off. But her hands were trembling as she shoved the note into the trash, and she quickly changed the subject, asking if I wanted takeout for dinner. I didn't push her then. Instead, I nodded and let her prattle on about Thai food. But the seed of doubt had already taken root. Something wasn't right. A few days after the roses incident, I tried to let it go. Maybe it really was a mix-up. Some unlucky neighbor who hadn't double-checked the address before playing Romeo. But something about Hannah had shifted. She was glued to her phone more than usual, her screen angled away from me whenever I walked into the room. Our conversations, once so effortless, were suddenly littered with awkward silences and vague answers. Then I found the lingerie. It was one of those evenings where boredom drove me to clean. Hannah was out, supposedly meeting her friend Brittany for dinner, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to tidy up the bedroom. As I was folding clothes and putting things away, I opened the closet door and saw a sleek black shopping bag tucked into the back corner. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached in and pulled it out, noting the name of a boutique I recognized as one of those upscale places she loved but rarely shopped at. Too expensive, she always said. Inside was a lace set, delicate, daring, and definitely not something I'd ever seen her wear for me. My first thought was, maybe she's saving it for our anniversary. But the tag had already been removed, and the smell of her favorite perfume clung faintly to the fabric. I stood there for a long moment, holding the lingerie like it was evidence in a crime scene. A sinking feeling gnawed at my stomach as I realized how much the details didn't add up. When she came home later that night, I didn't mention it. Instead, I watched her, noting the extra effort she'd put into her appearance. Her hair freshly done, her makeup subtle but flawless. Brittany was casual, laid back. She wouldn't have cared about Hannah showing up in a dress that hugged her body like a second skin. So, I asked casually as she slid into bed beside me. How's Brittany? Good, she said, a little too quickly. We had fun. Just girl talk, you know? Did you stay out long? She hesitated, then shrugged. Not really. She had an early morning, so we called it a night around 9. It was almost 11 when she got home. I didn't say anything more, but my suspicions were growing faster than I could control. If the roses were the spark, the lingerie was the gasoline. The lingerie lingered in my mind for days. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but every time I looked at Hannah, I felt paralyzed. Part of me didn't want to know the truth. It was easier to pretend nothing was wrong than to confirm what my gut was screaming. Then came Ryan. Hannah's best friend, Brittany, had invited us over for dinner. It was one of those casual gatherings where the food was good, the wine flowed freely, and everyone eventually got a little too comfortable. At some point during the evening, Brittany and Hannah disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me with Brittany's boyfriend, Jack. We were watching some highlights from a game when Brittany's voice carried from the other room. "Did Ryan text you today?" she asked, her tone playful. My ears perked up. "No, not today," Hannah replied, laughing nervously. "I told you, it's not what you think." "Oh, come on, Han," Brittany teased. "Lunch meetings, my ass. You've seen him more than you've seen me lately." Hannah shushed her, giggling. "Shut up, Britt." I froze. My blood turned cold as I replayed the exchange in my head. Who the hell was Ryan? And why was Brittany talking about him like he was a regular part of Hannah's life? When the women returned, I couldn't bring myself to meet Hannah's eyes. She acted like everything was normal, chatting and laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. On the way home, I decided to test the waters. "So, who's Ryan?" I asked, my tone deliberately casual. Her reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, followed by a forced laugh. "Ryan? Oh, he's just a guy from work." Brittany loves to blow things out of proportion. "Does she?" I pressed, watching her closely. "Yeah," she said quickly. "We've had a couple of working lunches, that's all." Totally innocent. I didn't believe her for a second. The way her hand gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly, the slight tremble in her voice, it all screamed guilty. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a tornado of suspicions, doubts, and the growing certainty that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Who was Ryan? Really? And how deep did this go? I couldn't get the name Ryan out of my head. Every time Hannah left the house or glanced at her phone, my thoughts spiraled. Was she meeting him? Texting him? Was she lying to my face while sneaking around behind my back? I needed answers. It didn't take long to find them. One afternoon, when Hannah claimed she was heading out for yoga, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I'd ever imagined doing. I'd always prided myself on trusting my wife. But trust had taken a back seat to the gnawing pit in my stomach. She didn't go to the yoga studio. Instead, she drove out of town, taking winding back roads that led to the edge of a dense forest. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding harder with every mile. Eventually, she pulled into the gravel driveway of a secluded cabin. I parked my car a little ways back, hidden behind a curve in the road, and crept closer on foot. From my vantage point behind a cluster of trees, I watched her knock on the cabin door. It swung open, and there he was. Ryan was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of polished, cocky confidence that set my teeth on edge. He greeted her with a smile that felt too intimate, too familiar. And then they kissed. It wasn't a peck on the cheek or some casual greeting. It was deep, lingering, the kind of kiss that made my blood boil. I stood frozen, every muscle in my body screaming at me to burst through the trees and confront them. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. My hands shook as I zoomed in, capturing every damning second of their embrace. They disappeared into the cabin after that, the door closing firmly behind them. I stayed there for what felt like hours, pacing and seething, imagining what was happening inside. When Hannah finally came out, her hair slightly mussed and her smile radiant, I knew. Whatever shred of denial I'd been clinging to was gone. She wasn't just having an affair, she was enjoying it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Hannah kissing Ryan, her smile when she left the cabin, the way she'd casually lied about yoga. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with. By morning, I had a plan. I spent the day gathering more evidence. I copied the video from my phone to my laptop and backed it up in multiple places. I went through Hannah's social media, her emails, even her credit card statements. She wasn't as careful as she thought. There were receipts for restaurants I'd never heard of and charges for hotels I'd never stayed at. The pieces all fit together. She was a liar, a cheater, and she'd been playing me for God knows how long. When she came home that evening, I was ready. "Hey, babe," she chirped as she walked through the door, setting her keys on the counter. "How was your day?" I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "How was yoga?" Her smile faltered for half a second before she recovered. "Oh, it was great. Really relaxing. You should try it sometime." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Cut the bullshit, Hannah. Her eyes widened. What are you talking about? I followed you, I said, my voice low and steady, to the cabin. I saw you with him. I saw everything. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her brain clearly scrambling for an excuse. Eric, don't, I snapped, cutting her off. I pulled out my phone and held up the video. Don't you dare try to lie to me. Her expression shifted, shock, guilt, and then defiance. So, what? You were spying on me? That's pathetic. Pathetic? I barked out a laugh. You're screwing some guy behind my back, and I'm pathetic? She crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Ryan. But can you blame me? You're so predictable, Eric. Every day is the same with you. Work, TV, bed. I needed something more. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Predictable? After everything I'd done for her, for us? And what? Ryan's your idea of excitement? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Sneaking around, lying to me, humiliating me. Is that fun for you, Hannah? She rolled her eyes. It's not like that. You wouldn't understand. No, I said, stepping closer. I understand perfectly. You're selfish. You're a liar. And you don't give a damn about anyone but yourself? For a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. But then she straightened, her expression hardening. If you're so unhappy, maybe we should just call it quits. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Maybe we should, I said coldly. But in my mind, I was already plotting my next move. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The house was suffocating after Hannah's confession. Her words echoed in my head, laced with venom. You're so predictable. I couldn't let her win, not like this. She spent the next couple of days acting like nothing had happened, probably thinking I'd take the bait and agree to call it quits without a fight. But I wasn't about to let her skate away clean. If she thought I was predictable, I'd show her just how wrong she was. I called in reinforcements. The first person I reached out to was my best friend, Marcus. He'd been my rock since college, the kind of guy who could rally anyone out of a bad spot. When I told him about Hannah's affair, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure about this? He asked finally. I have the video, Marcus, I said, my voice cold. There's no doubt. Jesus, he muttered. Okay, what's the plan? I laid it out for him. I needed a few close friends on my side, people who could back me up when I exposed her lies. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and making sure she couldn't twist the narrative. By the time I hung up, Marcus was fully on board. He even offered to host a small guys' night as a cover for the confrontation. Next, I called Brittany. It was a risk, considering she was Hannah's best friend, but I needed her perspective. Brittany answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. Hey, Eric. What's up? I need to talk to you, I said, skipping the pleasantries. About Hannah. Her tone shifted instantly. Is everything okay? No, I said bluntly. She's been cheating on me. With some guy named Ryan. There was a pause, and then Brittany let out a long sigh. I knew something was off, she admitted. She's been acting weird for months, secretive, always on her phone. I tried to ask her about it, but she just brushed me off. Did you know about him? I asked, my voice tight. No, she said firmly. And if I had, I would have told you. I swear. Eric. I believed her. Brittany had always been loyal, even if her friendship with Hannah complicated things. Can you do me a favor? I asked. Anything. Come to Marcus's on Saturday. I'm confronting her, and I want people there who know the truth. She hesitated, but finally agreed. I'll be there. By the time Saturday rolled around, I had my team assembled. Marcus, Brittany, and a few other friends who'd seen through Hannah's facade. The stage was set. Saturday night arrived with an air of anticipation, so thick I could feel it pressing down on my chest. Marcus had done a stellar job hosting the guys' night, which wasn't so much a party as it was the calm before the storm. Brittany arrived first, looking uneasy but determined. She gave me a quick hug before sitting down with Marcus and the others, her wine glass clinking as she set it on the table. You're doing the right thing, Eric, she said, her voice low but firm. I nodded, trying to ignore the knot of nerves twisting in my stomach. Hannah wasn't home yet. She'd gone out earlier in the day, claiming she had errands to run. It was almost poetic. Her lies had given me just enough time to rally my friends and prepare for what was coming. By the time I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway, the house was silent. Everyone was seated in the living room, their expressions a mix of anger and quiet support. The front door opened, and in walked Hannah, her face lighting up when she saw the group. "Wow, a full house tonight," she said, laughing as she set her purse on the counter. "What's the occasion?" No one answered. She looked around, her smile faltering as her eyes landed on me. "Eric? What's going on?" I stood, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She frowned, glancing nervously at Brittany and Marcus. "What's this about?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the TV and grabbed my laptop, connecting it to the screen. "What the hell is this?" she asked, her voice rising. "Sit down, Hannah," I said coldly. She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room, but she finally sat. I clicked play, and the video from the cabin filled the screen. There was no mistaking what it showed. Hannah and Ryan, locked in an intimate embrace. The room was silent except for the sound of her sharp intake of breath. "Eric," she started, her voice shaking. "I can explain." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "You've had plenty of chances to explain, Hannah. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." Her face crumpled, but her tears did nothing to sway me. I made a mistake," she stammered. "It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You kissed him. You spent hours with him in that cabin. You lied to my face over and over again. And you want me to believe it didn't mean anything?" She looked around the room, searching for an ally, but no one came to her defense. Brittany's glare was icy, and Marcus looked ready to explode. "You don't understand," Hannah said desperately. "Eric, we've been drifting apart. I needed something to feel alive again." My voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "And you thought screwing Ryan behind my back was the answer?" Her tears turned to anger. "Well, maybe if you hadn't been so boring, I wouldn't have needed to." The room erupted in gasps, but I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air. When the silence became unbearable, I spoke. "You're done, Hannah," I said, my voice like steel. "This marriage is over. I've already started the paperwork." She stared at me, her expression shifting from anger to panic. "Wait, Eric, please. Don't do this. We can fix it." "No," I said firmly. "You broke it, and you don't get to walk away without consequences." Her pleas fell on deaf ears. Marcus and Brittany ushered her out of the house, ignoring her protests as they guided her to her car. When the door finally closed behind her, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She was gone, and for the first time in months, I could breathe again. The house felt unnervingly quiet after Hannah left. For months, it had been the stage for her lies, her excuses, her endless web of deception. Now, with her gone, the silence was both a relief and a reminder of everything I'd lost. I sat at the dining table, staring at the divorce paperwork spread out in front of me. The words blurred as my mind raced with the events of the night. I'd exposed her, stripped her of her lies in front of everyone. But the victory felt hollow. Marcus stayed behind to help clean up, his steady presence keeping me grounded. "You okay, man?" he asked, stacking empty glasses in the sink. "I don't know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "I mean, I did what I had to do, but it still feels like shit." He nodded, leaning against the counter. "That's normal. You were blindsided by someone you trusted. It's not going to feel good overnight." We talked for a while, his advice cutting through the fog of my thoughts. By the time he left, I felt a little more focused, a little more sure of what I needed to do next. The first step was making the split official. Over the next week, I threw myself into the divorce process. My lawyer, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Christine, wasted no time dissecting the details of my case. "You've got leverage," she said, flipping through the evidence I'd collected. The video, the messages, the receipts, it's all airtight. She won't be able to argue for much in the settlement. Good, I said coldly. She doesn't deserve anything. Christine nodded. Let's make sure she gets what's fair, and nothing more. Hannah, predictably, tried to fight back. She called, texted, and even showed up at the house once, begging for a chance to talk things through. I refused to answer, letting her messages pile up unread. When she realized she wasn't going to get a response, her tone shifted. The pleading turned to bitterness, her texts dripping with accusations. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. Regret? The only thing I regretted was wasting years of my life with someone who didn't value me. As the legal battle unfolded, I began reclaiming my space. The bedroom was the first to go. I stripped the sheets, boxed up the photos of us, and even tossed out the perfume she'd left on the dresser. It felt cathartic, like purging a toxin from my life. Next came the living room, the closet, the kitchen. Everywhere I looked, there were traces of her. Clothes she'd forgotten, little trinkets from trips we'd taken, even her favorite mug. I packed it all into boxes and left them in the garage, sending her a single text. Your stuff is in the garage. Pick it up by Friday, or it's going in the trash. While I cleared out the physical reminders of Hannah, I worked on rebuilding myself. I started going to the gym again, hitting the weights harder than I had in years. The anger, the frustration, it all found an outlet there. Every rep, every drop of sweat felt like a step toward reclaiming the confidence she tried to strip away. I also reached out to old friends, people I drifted away from during my marriage. The support I got was overwhelming. Dinners, drinks, long phone calls where I could vent without judgment. It reminded me that I wasn't alone. Brittany, despite her complicated connection to Hannah, checked in often. You're doing amazing, she said one evening over coffee. She thought she could break you, but you're proving her wrong. Trying, I said, smiling faintly. The hardest part was the nights. Even with the house scrubbed clean of her presence, the bed still felt too big, too empty. Memories of happier times haunted me. Her laugh, the way she'd curl up beside me, the whispered promises of forever. But then I'd remember the cabin, the roses, the smug look on Ryan's face, and the anger would pull me through. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving, about building a life where I wouldn't be anyone's second choice. As the weeks turned into months, the chaos of the divorce began to settle. Hannah signed the papers after a half-hearted attempt to negotiate for more, but my lawyer shut her down with the stack of evidence I'd meticulously gathered. In the end, she walked away with only her personal belongings, and I kept everything else. It felt like justice. The house, however, was another story. It still carried the weight of her betrayal, every room steeped in memories I didn't want. So, I sold it. The process was faster than I expected, and soon I had the keys to a smaller, quieter place on the outskirts of the city. The house was nothing fancy, but it was mine, a fresh start in every sense. Setting up the new place became a project, a distraction from the ghosts of the past. I painted the walls, built furniture, and even planted a small garden in the backyard. It was therapeutic, watching something grow in a space that was entirely mine. Marcus and Brittany came by often, helping me settle in. You've got good taste, Brittany said one evening, admiring the art I'd hung in the living room. Hannah always made everything so beige. I laughed, shaking my head. I think I let her take over too much. Not happening this time. Marcus raised a beer in a silent toast. To doing things your way. To my way, I echoed, clinking bottles. With the house sorted, I turned my focus to a new venture. I'd always toyed with the idea of starting my own business, a custom furniture shop, blending craftsmanship with modern design. But Hannah had dismissed it as impractical, convincing me to stick to my corporate job. Now, there was nothing stopping me. I poured my energy into building a website, creating designs, and sourcing materials. The first orders trickled in slowly, but they were enough to keep me motivated. By the end of the first month, I had a steady stream of customers, and the satisfaction of creating something tangible was unlike anything I'd felt in years. It wasn't just a business, it was a statement, proof that I could thrive without her. The night still got to me sometimes. Even with a new bed, a new space, there were moments when the loneliness crept in. But instead of drowning in it, I faced it head-on. I started journaling, filling pages with thoughts I couldn't say out loud. One night, as I flipped through the journal, I came across an entry I'd written shortly after discovering Hannah's affair. She thought I wouldn't survive this, but I will, and I'll come out stronger than ever. I smiled, realizing how true those words had become. Brittany stopped by one afternoon, bringing a bottle of wine and a stack of business cards she'd made for my shop. "I'm proud of you, Eric," she said, her voice soft. "Thanks," I said, pouring us both a glass. "For everything. You and Marcus, you guys really pulled me through." "That's what friends are for," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "And don't think I haven't noticed how much happier you look these days. You're glowing." I chuckled. "Glowing, huh? That's new." "It's true," she insisted. "You've got your life back, Eric. Don't ever let anyone take that from you again." Her words stuck with me long after she left. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. 1 year after the confrontation, I stood in the small garden I'd planted behind my new house, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. The past year had been a whirlwind of change, some of it painful, most of it liberating. Hannah and Ryan had faded into the background of my life, little more than bitter memories. The divorce was finalized, the house sold, and I'd taken the proceeds to invest in my furniture business. Orders were pouring in, enough to keep me busy 6 days a week. I didn't just survive, I thrived. Looking back, there were moments that still stung. The nights when the silence was deafening, the first time I saw an old photo of us and realized I didn't recognize the person she'd become. But those moments were fleeting, and they were always followed by the small victories. The satisfaction of completing my first custom piece for a client. The pride of watching my bank account grow as my business took off. The warmth of reconnecting with friends who reminded me of my worth. Even the simple joy of planting tomatoes and watching them thrive in the sun felt like a triumph. I hadn't heard much about Hannah since the divorce. Brittany mentioned in passing that she tried dating Ryan for a while, but it fizzled out. No surprise there. What relationship built on lies ever lasts? As for me, I hadn't jumped back into the dating pool. Not yet. I wasn't in a rush. For the first time in years, I was learning to enjoy my own company, to define myself outside of a relationship. I went hiking again, a hobby I'd abandoned during my marriage. On the trails, I found peace. Just me and the rhythm of my steps, the rustling of leaves, the endless expanse of sky above me. One evening, I sat on my porch, sipping a beer as the sun dipped below the horizon. A journal sat open on the table beside me, filled with months of reflections. I flipped to a blank page and picked up a pen. If you're reading this and you're going through something similar, know this: you are stronger than you think. The pain will pass. The betrayal will lose its sting. And one day, you'll look back and realize it was the beginning of something better. I paused, letting the words sink in before adding one final line. She didn't break me. She made me. I closed the journal, setting it aside. The air was cool and quiet, the stars just starting to emerge. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. This was my life now, simple, steady, and mine. And for that, I was deeply, endlessly grateful. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.